Mean white kids. Prediction. Mean white kids.
Really?
That's how you
Really?
start the video, huh?
Really?
What I was about to say
Really?
was it's disgusting lives of rich kids, and I was gonna say, do you think any of them gonna be black?
Yeah, but you didn't. You just,
Just went right in. Just went
Speaking of
right
racial
to the punchline.
stereotypes,
Right.
Been a good life. Some the money, some the drugs, others the sex game, the glamour, or the fame.
A kid who has everything. Parties. Super yacht.
I'm going to inherit more money than most people could earn or spend in a lifetime.
It would be a low estimate, a very low estimate for me to say 20 billion.
damn.
Growing up rich is the dream. Your parents buy you anything you want, you go to the best schools, you only hang out with other rich kids, you get to party with all the right people. As a rich kid, you never experience any hardship. Life is as good as it gets. Or is it?
I've always hated how just because someone is born into a family of wealth, people automatically label them as a spoiled brat. Yes, my dad has a private jet, and I love flying in it. Yes, my dad has a mansion and cars, and I love making videos with them. Who wouldn't? But I have never pretended that those things were something that I earned.
Just to give people context, okay, so I was born in one of the poorest countries in the world, and then I grew up in one of the poorest communities in the United States. I'm fully aware of the criticism, and I've also seen the other side of things, which is like as an adult, most of the people I deal with tend to be, very wealthy individuals or very wealthy families. And so I've seen both sides of the extremes. And after seeing everything, I would say that I have never seen a single person from a poor community even remotely as mentally ill as kids from rich families. Like, you can't even compare the two. However much you feel like your parents might be disappointed in you, you multiply that by 1 billion and now you understand what it's like to grow up as a rich kid. So again, I'm saying this as someone who's been to the extremes of both ends. You just can't compare the two. Like, I would absolutely, if I had to.
Why was there imagery for poor kids, black kids?
Hey,
I was thinking that. I was like, damn, why did we say poor kids? It was all black kids.
I have no regrets about how I opened up the video.
Like, I know more. I personally, I guess, know more poor white kids than I do poor black guys in my area, but it just might be the area I live in.
Yeah, because the black guys in your area is selling drugs.
They rich.
I mean, to be honest, like not most of them, not all, they selling drugs and they getting top dollar for cocaine in your area. So yeah.
Like start life over again, I would absolutely choose to start again in a super poor community and live in a poor community for the rest of my life than to have to start life in a rich community and deal with all the pressures and consequences.
But why? Why are rich kids so miserable and mentally ill? Stay dangerous and let's find out. The first step in understanding the misery of rich kids is to understand that by just being alive right now, you are already one of the richest people in history.
Most of us, technically we're wealthier than most of human history, simply by the fact that most of us have access to clean water, to a wide range of foods, we have electricity, we have, we have air conditioning, heating, like all these random things that we take for granted. That by definition would make us wealthier than most humans that have ever existed.
And yet, although we are technically filthy rich compared to our ancestors, we don't feel rich because all of this is normal to us. And that's exactly what it's like for rich kids growing up. The mansions, the cars, the clothes, the fancy sports and black tie events. This is their normal growing up. And because it was their normal, growing up, they have no idea that they're rich. Growing up, they don't view themselves as anything special. They just look at their rich friends and their parents' rich friends, and they just assume that the entire world is like that.
My dad brought us up, always telling us we were poor.
I was fairly average, and I didn't know my dad had a lot of money until I turned 15.
I didn't always know I was rich. I know it sounds a little strange to say that, but growing up in the country, I just thought that everybody had carriages and horses and stuff like that. I mean, what did I do to earn the kind of money I'll own at midnight tonight? All I did was inherit it.
I mean, growing up, everything just seems normal. You go to a museum, you're like, yeah, that's me, that's my family, And don't you have a family museum? My mom had never really been on the subway. I took her on the other day, and she was
Don't y'all got family members in the museum? No?
like, whoa, this is cool. Other people should do this.
And although it may sound like they're just so out of touch, well yeah, that is exactly the point. If you grew up without knowing any other way of life, you wouldn't have anything to compare your lifestyle to. How would you have any idea that things could be different for other people? The answer is you wouldn't. And you won't find out until you graduate from your bubble and you get pushed out into the real world where you're forced to actually make something out of yourself. And that's when you get a giant slap in the face.
And then you go out into the real world and you're told that you now need to make your own money. And very quickly you realize that it's incredibly difficult to make the kind of money that your parents made or your grandparents made. And now you went from what was normal to you to now feeling like you're in extreme poverty compared to what you're used to.
What do you think? What would you do if you lost all your money tomorrow morning?
I don't know. It's kind of like, well, I'm not going to compare it to that, but it is in the same way like the idea of losing a parent or a sibling.
And now you're in this extremely insecure situation where, like, imagine for anyone watching, like, if you suddenly went from your existing situation and your existing comforts to going into living in the woods, basically, for the next 2 years by yourself. I think the dynamic is kind of a mixed feelings. It's mostly a sad one where, you're grateful, but then now you feel like a failure. So you end up feeling guilty a lot of the time. And you also feel like you're in some sort of rush to now get rich quick. And given that weird dynamic of extreme guilt and this heavy rush, you just keep running on a treadmill and you never actually get anywhere in life.
I did a portrait for Princess Farrell Jordan, Mandolina Theodokopoulos, Alexandra von Furstenberg. I just did one of Alex and Talita von Furstenberg. This one is very sort of Basquiat.
And what does that say?
I will spend the rest of my life trying to live up to ideals I don't think I can.
And then they start pressuring you to actually marry someone that they think, is also high status, which again, like, creates a weird pressure on you.
Prenup. It's been drilled into my head since I was 5 years old. Prenup.
That becomes a huge contentious part, in most rich families, I would say, is like who you end up marrying. And overall, the actual day-to-day experience, though, is one where the rich kid himself or herself just feels like a nobody. And some of them, What do
you guys think about this video so far?
Boo.
Boo.
I have no sympathy for some of these rich kids.
Mm-hmm.
And 2, I hate this cockatoo-haired motherfucker.
Yeah.
I always have.
Yeah.
I think it's just straight up bullshit. I think it's propaganda.
Yep.
I think
to humanize them? Is that what they're trying to do right here? Humanize rich kids?
To make you feel bad for people, for the minority of rich kids. And try to paint that same brush over all rich kids as if that's a shared experience, and it's not. Like it just seems like bullshit.
I've been having I'm not shit and want to be killed by black men and white men equally in my head, and he's been getting drilled prenup in his head. I mean, he gets me. He understands.
Right. Like he's like, they have it so much worse. It's like you would rather that than worry about like being killed driving to Texas. Like you could literally die as a black man driving to Texas. Just
as
driving.
a white man too. I had one of my white friends get killed like that.
And that's police.
Yeah. No, he got killed by the cartel. Actually a big it's actually a big deal. Adolfo Costanza killed him. Which was like a voodoo head of a drug cartel. Yeah.
I was just saying, like, I was trying to point out how, like, poor black people have way bigger problems than prenuptial agreements.
Well, I was just pointing out that human beings have a fucking problem in general. Like I told you,
that goes without saying, though.
Yeah, like I told you, I guess the reason why I'm saying it like that is because moving to Wisconsin, I'd have been around so many. All the white kids I hung around, most of them were poor. Like I hung around some older white gentlemen who was well off, but most of the kids I hanged around out there was poor like a motherfucker. They was like the white version of me.
Most people are poor. It's like there's very few like actual mega wealthy people. most people in America are either working class or poor.
Yeah.
So I get that, like, poverty sucks all around.
How rich was this guy again?
This guy?
Yeah.
He worked for like the Wolf of Wall Street, so probably mega rich.
Might end up blaming their parents or oftentimes their grandparents, and you see this with Luke Skywalker. But like, because they feel so insecure and they feel like such a nobody, it might turn into enough anger where they want to scapegoat their parents or scapegoat whoever it is in the family that made them rich.
And the perfect example of this is from a documentary called Born Rich, which you've been seeing throughout this video. Highly recommend. Born Rich was made by a rich kid named Jamie Johnson, who is part of the insanely wealthy Johnson & Johnson dynasty. And the one thing his family hated the most was talking about money. But because Jamie Johnson probably had similar feelings to what Arvid just described, Jamie Johnson needed to rebel. He needed to figuratively kill his father. And so he produced a documentary exposing what it's actually like to be born rich.
So I was just kind of a mess. I was weird. I mean, some of my friends tell me about how I used to just go off in the woods and climb up to the very top of a tree and sort of make weird noises and scare people.
I mean, the first time I tried LSD was this summer.
We are on the 68th floor. Okay, ready for me to look totally retarded?
Needless to say, his family and the other families he exposed were not very happy.
And honestly, for the parents, they're not mentally doing okay either. Like, they're like losing it in terms of like making sure that they're not failures as parents. So most of the parents of rich kids, I've never really met one that doesn't feel like a complete failure on some level, because they feel like it was their responsibility to ensure that their kid was high achieving and successful, and they invested all this time and energy and money into it. But, you know, let's say the kid ends up like a normal functioning person in society. That to them implies that they did a bad job compared to these, you know, other rich parents where their kids ended up, let's say, going into the family business and becoming even wealthier. And those parents, like what you see in like the TV shows, they really are going to these stupid parties and like, you know, bragging and all this nonsense. Usually it's not a fun situation for anyone involved. And so you'll oftentimes find this like lawsuit cases with these, you know, multi-billion-dollar families, and they're suing each other for like 10, 20 years. They just don't stop suing each other. Like, the family internal conflict is huge, especially when the amount of money inside the family is large enough to where it can spread across many people. The conflict that ends up happening is almost unbelievable. It's like, you know, much crazier than anything you'd see in TV shows or movies.
What I find interesting is that what you said, if you grow up in an absolutely poor family, like literally anything you do above that, your parents will be super, super proud of you. But if you grow up in a rich family, then it's practically impossible to like get higher than them.
Yeah, and they want you to somehow, you know, start back from zero and then climb up and then go higher. It's like it's functionally an impossible situation. So it's almost guaranteed that, you know, if you're the kid of a really wealthy parents, like, you know, you're likely going to have a lot of mental issues. They end up.
I can see that because my parents ain't wealthy and they expectation of me was super high. But like I told them, look at how I raised Sabius. Did I come down on him like that? You know what I mean?
You know what? I will say something, bitch, but I'm getting kind of sleepy and this shit is boring. I'm like, boo! They crying about they're stressed because they didn't make enough money. And I'm like, poor kids. They're talking about the exception would be like people in the middle bracket, because if poor kids are also like, if they don't amount to anything, their parents don't praise them either. So it's
that's actually what I was gonna say. Like, that's a shared experience that all parents have. Like, parents always stress their kids out, trying to make them better than what they were. They always expect them to somehow do better, even if they weren't taught. They're supposed, because they were in a better world or a better environment, they're supposed to just spontaneously do better. It's like, that's a shared experience. So why is the rich kid going through it somehow worse than the poor kid going through it?
I guess because I'm guessing it's because, like, okay, your dad can be middle class, your parents can be middle class, and it's like, you want me to do so much more, but look where you at. You know what I'm saying? You didn't do much more than your parents wish for you, but as a rich kid, it's proof there. Like.
But as a rich kid, you're like, well, I could never reach that anyway.
Right.
Because you set the bar too high. So you still got an excuse.
I know, but I'm just saying the parent is like, well, shit, look at me. You know, look what I turned into. Why you not turning into that? You know, it's because I coddled you, because I spoiled you. Now you're a failure because now you this rich, entitled fucking kid who think the worst of your life is being my fucking child, which
And then it's,
jeopardizes our dynasty.
I
then it's like
despise
boo
rich
hoo.
kids.
They said like, oh, when they move out and or they go to school, they live in poverty. I'm like, bullshit. Like I know a bunch of rich kids that got rich parents, and so they moved out of college. Their parents still take care of them. Even if they was in when they was in college and outside, they still helped them with their apartment. Granted, it might not be as lavish as they were when they were living at home, but it's far from poverty.
Far from poverty. Yeah.
Uh,
So what is poverty? Because when
Poverty
I
is
was in
a
the
spiritual
county,
state.
I was waiting.
well,
What you say, Frank?
I tell you what, anybody in Chicago will tell you Cook County Jail is fucked up. But I was locked up with a Mexican that was directly from Sharky. He was directly from Mexico. He said that motherfucker like a condo to him. And compared to where he was living and the way he was living and the jails he went to in Mexico, he's like he can do a life sentence in Cook County Jail.
Well, yeah, the problem is going to be relevant to wherever area environment you're in. Yeah, like they said earlier, poverty. We couldn't he consider us wealthy because we have running water and stuff. That yeah,
Right.
but most homes have running water in the U.S. Now that still may be poverty or in the U.S., but that's not the same poverty level in some where you said Mexico, where they don't even have running water. They might have a different level of poverty, but it's related to the area environment you're in.
I tell you what, that don't make him more comfortable. You can't be living in the ghetto of Chicago and somebody say, "Oh, in fucking Africa, we walk barefoot." And all this, like, bro, I don't give a fuck what y'all do over there. This sucks right here. You know what I'm saying? I wouldn't give a fuck how nobody else is living. But yeah, this one, this one sucked ass. I'm gonna stop.